Hello and welcome to Ways to Change the World. I'm Krishnan Murthy, and this is the podcast in which we talk to remarkable people about the big ideas in their lives, the way they see the world, and the events that have helped shape them. My guest today is a man who is changing the world really at the moment, because he recently made a very eye-opening, breathtaking documentary about his own life and his own experience of psychosis as a young actor in London. David Harewood, welcome.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
Why did you decide to reveal this? Because it's an extraordinarily honest hour of television.
It is, and I'm sort of retrospectively thinking, what on earth have I done? But this happened 30 years ago, and it's a story I've always wanted to tell, a story I've always kind of sort of almost been dying to tell. But it was only when I started making the documentary that I actually realized what it was, that it was psychosis, and that this is a medical condition, and that this happens to so many more people. And I mean, initially it was really just to offer support. I tweeted this thing out just to offer support.
For Mental Health Awareness
For Mental Health Awareness Month. I tell my friends, personally, I've told my friends over the years that I've had, then I used to say I had a breakdown. And I talk to them about being in a mental institution and stuff. And everyone's always kind of aghast, because they think, oh, you're this successful actor. This happened to you. So I always knew it was quite a story, but it was only when I started, as I say, making the documentary that it really started to kind of unfold that I was at several stages of this illness. I was extremely lucky to survive. I've been stopped in the street by people who wept in the street with people who told me that their uncles, fathers died while they were being restrained by police. 2-3 people have told me that their family members have died while being restrained. Another taxi driver told me that he'd seen the documentary, told me that his brother died while being medicated. So somehow I got through this and came out the other end and went on to build a successful career. And it just continues to resonate. It's extraordinary. But
it sounds like there's a sort of unlocked new role in your life. That you are now going to be, or are, an ambassador for this, for somebody who can talk about this. Because when you say breakdown, it's so much more than a breakdown, isn't it? Breakdown for many people is, somebody who has a bad week, can't get out of bed for a week, or needs some antidepressants, or yours was explain what psychosis is.
Well, psychosis is it's very difficult to sort of describe exactly what it is, but it is kind of made up of like 3 symptoms, which is kind of hallucinations, which is hearing or seeing things. There's a delusional quality where you kind of lose touch with reality. You may, as I say, hear things that aren't, believe things that aren't real, like you are a messiah, or you might believe that you can fly. I believe that Martin Luther King was speaking to me. And thought disorder, which is continually sort of switching subject and being very disorientated and very unable to maintain a conversation, because your thoughts are simply just flying all over the place. So I kind of started to develop these symptoms while I was on stage. I was up in Derby playing Sloane, and I knew things were not quite right, but psychosis can be sort of preempted by a sort of mania, which is a sort of rush of dopamine. There's several chemicals that sort of get imbalanced in your brain, one of which is dopamine. And dopamine can give you that kind of heightened sense of euphoria. And so there was a moment where I thought I was, really flying. I was really, because it was almost fun not sleeping and waking up at 3 a.m. and kind of jumping out of bed and grabbing a book and reading, and then going for a walk at 4 a.m. These all seemed like they were very odd sort of things that were happening to me, but they were quite exciting. And I've spoken to therapists who say that there are many people who don't want to take medication because they don't want to lose that. They don't want to lose that sort of rush of that euphoric sort of sense, that mania. Kanye West talks about it. That sort of. Because he's bipolar. He talks about sometimes it's like his superpower. And you listen to his albums, and you kind of do get a sense, where has that come from? It's really sort of out there. And of course, Carrie in Homeland is famously sort of, when she's off her meds, famously sort of brilliant. So I do think there's a quality to that mania which is kind of seductive.
Obviously, you were David Estes in Homeland. What was it like being in something that portrayed this illness?
Well, I played Estes, who was a real by the book sort of guy, and Carrie was the kind of fly by the seat of her pants kind of person. And I remember Claire telling me that she would sit up all night on YouTube. Is a wonderful source of research for actors these days, because she would kind of go on YouTube and search out these people who are bipolar, and they just sit for hours just talking about what's happening to them, what's going through their minds. And she kind of accessed a real energy that was quite extraordinary, really quite. She's an extraordinary actress anyway. Temple Grandin is one of her famous. I think she won an Emmy for Temple Grandin. She's an extraordinary actress, but sitting next to her as she was sort of racing and pacing around, and famously the one scene at the end of I think it's at the end of one of the episodes of season 1, where I just walk in and she's got the board that she's worked out, all of the connections that are going on. She's worked it all out, and I just kind of walk in and just say, "Strip it." And "strip it" was never part of the actual text. I made that up, but we never rehearsed it because she was sort of waiting for us to come in. So we just kind of said, let's just, rather than rehearse it, because Claire's just primed for it, let's just do it. And she was brilliant. And, I just kind of walked in, looked at her, we had a couple of lines together, and I looked at the board and just said, "Strip it." And she just freaked out. And the cameras were kind of rushing around, kind of capturing what she was doing. And then we filmed for a further 2 or 3 minutes that weren't on the page, but just capturing some really amazing stuff.
And was it uneasy at all for you? I mean, had you talked to her about your own experience?
No, to be honest with you, I'd forgotten it. I mean, I'll be honest with you, this whole last couple of years has been exhausting because I've been reliving it. And I thought I was in a good place with it. I thought I knew exactly what happened. I thought it was just a thing. And making a documentary was kind of the toughest thing I've ever done, because I got the truth. And reading my medical records was probably the toughest thing I've ever had to witness, because I'm looking at my disturbed 22-year-old self. Some of the things that I was saying about race, about me, about my identity, were really disturbing. And I thought, wow, how did I get so detached? How did I allow myself to get so confused? So that was very, very powerful and very uncomfortable for me. So, and I remember sitting in one of the classrooms. We went to an early intervention center where they discuss psychosis with young people who are recovering from psychosis. It was a room full of about 30 kids. And I was there as a kind of guest, but I was sitting in this classroom thinking, I've never heard this before. I'm learning, so I should be in this class right now. So at one point I put my hand up and I answered a question. I talked for a bit, and they all kind of looked at me. And this one girl said, "Well, how would you know? How would you know? You're off the telly. How would you know?" And I said, "Well, it happened to me." And the entire room just span round and went, "The guy off the telly had a psychotic episode?" And suddenly the temperature in the room changed, and they began to question me. And they began to realize that, yes, I had a similar experience. And that really kind of broke the barriers down. But it was only then that I sort of realized that what had happened to me. I realized that I'd had a psychotic break. Up until then, I just thought I really had no idea what it was, really.
So you're still processing what happened to you?
Completely, still
Having
processing.
discovered it
Yeah.
only recently.
Still processing it, still processing what it means to me. I mean, I'm one of the 15% of people who've never needed further medication. I never had any therapy afterwards. I never had any further medication. I never had any treatment. I simply went home to my mum's, went and sat on the sofa for 2 or 3 months and then got back on with my career. So in a way, I probably needed to do this 25 years ago. But I'm processing it now and understanding what it means, and also looking at, I think I do feel quite blessed. I feel quite privileged because I do believe there has been a transformative quality to my psychotic episode. I do believe it changed me.
How?
And gave me a level of insight, which I've been able to draw on for my art, for my acting. I find acting very easy. I'm not saying I'm any good, but I find it very easy. I find it very easy to jump into character. I find it very easy to sort of express myself, to go to places, quite dark places, emotional places.
And you think it's to do with that?
I do. I think it's kind of opened doors that simply weren't there before.
Yeah, I mean, you talked about it as an illness.
Some people don't.
So what I mean is, do you think it was a thing that you were ill for a period of time? You caught an illness and then you got rid of it? Or is it something that you still have, or had before, or what?
I say I'd call it an illness because it's definitely something that got away from me. It was a condition that got away from me. No, not sleeping, overuse of marijuana, drinking heavily, and the combination of all three of those things, of kind of turning things over, my thoughts turning over, and trauma. And there was a lot of trauma in my early career, confusion of my identity, sort of being rejected by white people, white critics and white audiences who were not used to black actors playing Shakespeare, not comfortable with black actors playing some roles. I remember when I played Othello at the National, The Independent ran this piece. I remember reading it, and it was saying, who is this guy, David Harewood? Why isn't Brian Cox doing this? Why can't what is this political correctness, this nonsense? Who is this young man? And I remember reading this thinking, they really don't want us to play this role. And I was the first black actor to play Othello at the National Theatre, which is extraordinary. There hasn't been a white actor black up to play that role in America since 1935. Yet I was the first one in 1998. It's extraordinary how far behind the curve we were. So there was a reluctance to see us as leading Shakespearean actors. And I felt that. But then again, I also felt that the black audience that I was playing, the black audiences I was playing in front of initially, thought, well, who's this posh black person? Doesn't speak like us, doesn't act like us, he's almost white, the idea of being a coconut. So I was quite rejected by certain aspects of the black community.
Is that what you felt like?
Yeah, very much so.
Yourself,
Yeah. I felt very like a fish out of water. I knew I was not...
Didn't really belong.
I didn't belong. I was other. I felt other. And I was being made to feel other. I remember I was in Leeds, Derby rather, playing Sloane, in entertaining Mr. Sloane, which is it's a very funny play, but it's a very dark play. Sloane is a character that's bisexual. He's a murderer. He's a sexual deviant. Again, in those days, it was quite novel. There was these crop of trained black actors. So directors were going, oh, I know. I'll make that character black. So they made Sloane black. And of course, I was, again, unaware of those sort of nuances out there. And black audiences really didn't like it. And it was at a time when, black audiences were complaining that, why are we always the baddies? Why are we always the muggers? Why are we always the criminals? Why can't we be the good guys? So here was me taking a role of a sexual deviant murderer, albeit a very funny play. And black people walked out. Several black people. I have this Sloane has this monologue at the start of the second half, which is very dark. He talks about basically molesting this young girl. And it's quite funny and it's quite challenging. And Joe Orton is specifically trying to challenge the audiences of the sort of prim audiences of the 60s. He's really trying to push the boundaries. And several black audience members walked out. And I found that really upsetting. And literally, and I could tell they were going to walk out. So every night I'd kind of had to brace myself. And as soon as I started started my monologue, they would get up and walk out in numbers. And so I did feel rejected. I felt like they weren't supporting me, and it was very uncomfortable.
So that was the trauma.
Yeah.
I mean, you mentioned marijuana. I mean, people now link marijuana to psychotic episodes. Do you think there was a direct link in your case?
Look, there are many psychotic episodes that aren't caused by marijuana, but I certainly think it can be a key. And certainly right now with our current drug laws, I think that there isn't enough information out there. And stuff is being grown today hydroponically, in warehouses, in houses, illegally, sprayed with all sorts of chemicals. And this stuff isn't the stuff that I smoked when I was a kid. It's not the stuff that was around in the 80s, 70s and 80s. It's not from Jamaica. It's not imported and grown from Jamaica. This is stuff which is chemically enhanced and sprayed to increase its potency. And I do believe that it is I wouldn't say it's a gateway drug at all, but I do believe that consistent smoking, strong skunk weed, consistently hitting that can lead to paranoia, can lead to erratic behavior, and I think it can lead to psychosis.
So from a health perspective, you would say these drugs are dangerous?
They're dangerous to a degree. I do believe we need to have an adult conversation. I mean, the war on drugs was lost a long time ago. Let's educate people. Let's tell people exactly what's in this stuff. Let's educate them about the strength of it. What is THC? What's CBD? What are the qualities what are the inherent qualities in marijuana that get you high? Can you reduce it? Can you take them out? Can you buy an edible which has no THC in it or CBD in it, which you can? And I mean, I live in Canada right now. I live and work in Vancouver. And within 5 minutes of my house, I can legally buy marijuana in at least 3 different dispensaries. I can ask for a stronger or a weaker. I can ask for something which is more heady, something which is more in my body. I can smoke it. I can chew it. I can suck it. I can put it in a sweetie. It's just you go in there on a Friday afternoon, and end of the week, there's businessmen in there. There's mothers. There's dads. There's families. It's extraordinary.
And do you still take it?
I still smoke it. I don't. I'm careful.
So you're not afraid?
No. I'm wary. I know when I have to be very careful. And since the documentary, it has just gone insane for me. I mean, I'm asked to speak at this event. I'm going to, you go to the Houses of Commons, and I'm doing a lot of work with UNICEF now, with Soccer Aid, which is wonderful, and I'm very proud of that. But I seem to have taken too much on. The last couple of nights have been very uncomfortable for me because I know I've got to make a speech tonight, and then I've got to go that on Thursday, and then I've got to do that on Friday, and then I've got to go there on Saturday. And then I look in my diary, and I'm still, my wife's getting annoyed because I'm never home, and I'm never seeing my kids, and I'm never seeing. So I know that now would not be a good time for me to sit down and start burning weed. It just wouldn't be a good time for me because I wouldn't sleep. I still wouldn't be sleeping. My thoughts would be racing. So I'm very careful. I know when things are. It's not wise to stress myself. I'm already stressed a little bit. So,
but that's a very intelligent position to be in, because a lot of people in your situation would go, "That's exactly when I do need it, because I need it to relax."
You need it to relax, yeah. But I guess I know where the line is, and I'm right up against that line right now. Now would not be the right time for me to get too drunk, hit the weed, because that would send me into an altered state. And it's when you're in that altered state and you're tired where things can start to unravel.
So what do you think an intelligent conversation about drugs would look like in Britain? I mean, decriminalisation would, take out a lot of the crime around drugs is one argument.
That's certainly the case. I'm sure some of it would still be there. And it depends on which drugs we're talking about. I think we have to look at certain models. I think Portugal has legalized all drugs, and they found some great studies have come out of there. They found that people, even on the harder drugs, don't take them for as long because there isn't that sort of kind of clandestine kind of coolness around it. People try it. It's not for me. They move on. They put it down. And so I just think we need to educate people about it.
So you said you felt like a fish out of water. You didn't really belong. Can we go back to sort of childhood? What kind of childhood did you have?
I had a wonderful childhood. A very sort of playful childhood. Very playful at home. Some really, really good friends.
Where were your parents from?
My parents from Barbados, and they came over late 50s, early 60s, and we were the first black family on the street. I remember the odd sort of racist chant or the odd sort of racist verbal assault that would just be random, and you'd kind of tense up and freeze up, and so you could never forget it. And I think that was probably one of the most unsettling things about growing up is the randomness of racism. You'd meet 10 white people who were wonderful and had not an ounce of sort of racism, a racist bone in their body, and then that 10th person would call you a nigger, and you'd sort of jolt and kind of go, oh shit, and remember that racism exists and sort of curl up in a ball and then sort of throughout the day sort of unwind, forget, get on with your life. But I do remember, I said this the other day, I do remember that chant as a child. Yeah, there ain't no black in the Union Jack. It was a faint, I don't know why that's stuck in my mind. And I do remember the...
Well, kids used to say it at school kind of jokingly as well, didn't they?
Well, I just remember, I heard these weren't jokes.
I heard it with reality myself, but I also heard it kind of said as a way of teasing. People used to tease you.
I heard it with malice. And I remember the Queen's Silver Jubilee and the street being covered in Union Jacks and it being really terrifying me. I didn't know where I belonged. That was the first time I thought, oh, I don't quite know what's going on. Should I be celebrating this? Should I be kind of cheering?
Am I part of this?
Am I part of this? And that kind of, I guess that's lasted. That's been under, since the documentary I'd sought out a therapist, and a black therapist, specifically sought out a black therapist because I wanted to deal with something. And it's been wonderful to uncover certain things that I seem to have carried from being a child, and one of those is that sense of otherness.
So, are you part of it now? You're an MBE. If that's not part of it, what is?
Yeah, I know, I know. And I went to the palace the other day. They used to hand out some Duke of Edinburgh. But I saw these two. There were two or three young black people there, and they specifically sought me out and asked me advice. And if I do think we have to join these institutions. I do think we have to become part of these institutions, or else things aren't going to change. They specifically sought me out because they wanted to ask me specific questions about what happens when I'm the only black person in the room. Now, if I had have turned that down, they probably wouldn't have had anyone to ask that. So I do feel that by joining, that's how we're going to change things, by joining.
Do you feel like you've joined it? Because when I go to these things, I still feel like sort of an imposter.
Of course, I still feel like, yeah.
But I find it sort of quite funny inside that I'm there.
Yes, of course. We're like, it's like someone somewhere is going to come along and say, "Can you leave, please?" And that's funny, and that's kind of amusing.
So do you feel British?
I do.
That's quite a pause there.
I do. But I've had the fortune to have spent the last 8 years in America, and I've grown exponentially because of that experience. Seeing black advancement, seeing black power, seeing black people in a management level, at a powerful executive level, and seeing it every day run of the mill. I remember the first time I went to America, we had to open a bank account. So I went into this bank and I said, I need to open a bank account. I said, certainly, just have to wait in that room and wait for the bank manager. So I was sitting in this room. 20 minutes later, this young black girl, couldn't have been no older than 26, 27. She walked in and she went, yeah, can I help you? And I went, yeah, I'm just waiting for the bank manager. She went, yeah, you're speaking to her. And I nearly kind of choked, and she laughed. She said, have you never seen a black bank manager before? And I said, no, never in my life. It was quite fascinating because, again, affirmative action over there, which is controversial, and there are many black people who want to get rid of it. There are many black conservatives who want to get rid of it. But it has changed the executive levels of America in a way that we still haven't done so here. We're still not management level. We're getting there. We're still not editors of, we're not editors of any of the major papers. Edward Einfeld, I think, is there at Vogue. But we're still not getting into the power rooms, and I don't think things are going to change until we do in this country. So I've been fortunate enough to be a part of that and to kind of have that affect me.
So are you more drawn to America?
Not necessarily. I must admit, Brexit has made me feel like a stranger in my own town. Again, I've been away so long, and the last thing I remember sitting there with Damien Lewis, watching the 2012 Olympic Games, the opening ceremony, and the two of us kind of beaming with pride, watching this sort of multicultural, progressive, forward-looking ceremony. It was wonderful. The NHS was there, the industrial age was there, and there were black people, Asian people. It was just wonderful. It's like a carnival of Britain. And then flick forward 6, 7 years, and the next thing I'm hearing about Brexit. What's this thing? What is this thing, Brexit? I kind of laughed about it. I thought it was nonsense. And I saw Farage, and I thought, wow, he's never no one's ever gonna get behind him. Lo and behold, a couple of years ago, I fly back to England for summer holiday for my hiatus. Brexit vote. I thought this is going to be a walk in the park. But I remember seeing the night before there was a BBC sort of kind of one of the final debates or something, and it was Boris Johnson doing his kind of St. Crispin's Day speech of sort of kind of independent Britain sort of thing, and the entire audience stood up at the end of this speech and applauded, and I thought, whoa. This is seductive. People are going for this. And it was so confusing for me. There were Labour politicians sitting next to Tories, sitting next to Lib Dems, all on one side of Brexit, and then on the other side, there were the similar lot sitting on the pro-Remain side. It was just so confusing. I thought, what's going on here? Tories and Labour saying Brexit and Tories and Labour saying leave. I didn't know what was going on. And then that morning, I never forget that Thursday morning when I woke up and people had voted to leave. And that, shocked me. So I don't feel like this is the same place. I think something's happening. And it worries me because...
does it take you back to...
Yeah.
There ain't no black in the Union Jack?
It takes me back to that. And it takes me back to intolerance. It takes me back to racism. And... look, I'm sure there's lots of Brexit people out there who aren't racist, and I got quite a lot of stick for even suggesting it on my Twitter feed. But they can't, people who in that camp cannot deny there has been a rise in hate crimes, cannot deny it's unleashed a real ugliness in the country, an intolerance and an ugliness. But again, London's different, and I still love London. And I walk, go out here, walk out London, and you'll see a French shop and then a, Mediterranean shop. And I love being here. I love how international this city is. But even London's sort of creaking. And when I saw on YouTube last year, somebody turning around to a Brazilian couple saying, "Speak English when you're here." I was shocked. I thought, London? And then the other day, a homophobic attack on a London bus. What's going on here? It's just... I always thought London was so progressive and stylish and welcoming and international. it seems like something's changing, and I regret that.
I mean, you have been able to go to America and work, and that's been controversial in two ways. Not controversial, but there are two controversies around it. One is that in Britain, the creative arts are still having a convulsion about what to do about diversity and whether there are enough black roles, and what to do about it and whether we should have quotas or what, and in America, there's also a bit of controversy there about all these Brits turning up in Hollywood.
Who would have thought, you spend your life fighting against injustice and sort of all this racism in England, only to get to America and find that you have another battle. And I guess, look, migrants, economic migrants are always going to face sort of resistance because the indigenous population doesn't want anybody from outside coming in. And
have you felt that in America?
I've never felt it personally, but I've become aware of it. I think Samuel L. Jackson, and he was probably an offhand, probably a very flippant quote, when asked, why are black actors doing so well, why are black British actors doing so well? He said, no, because they're cheap. And that upset a lot of people. It upset a lot of black actors, a lot of us. We were all like, we've looked up to these guys for years. We've looked up to them as our heroes. And here we were being dismissed. It felt really wrong. So I sort of tried to write an article just explaining how I approach my work. When we did the play The Mountaintop, which is a very controversial play. It's a play about the last night of Martin Luther King's life. It's extremely irreverent, very, very funny. Certainly not what you'd expect from a black American writer. I made a choice, which was to approach it like a character. And it seemed to work because the play was highly successful, very funny. And I remember one day getting a letter from a group of American students who asked me to come to their college and talk to them. And I did. And they kind of said, look, we all went expecting this solemn evening of reverence. And he said, the one guy said, this is a black guy, he said, the last thing I expected to be doing in a play about the last night of Martin Luther King's life is laughing. He said, we were all stifling laughter for the first 10 minutes. He said, by the end, we were literally rolling about in the aisles. He said, we just never expected that. And I felt quite pleased about that because it challenged your notions. It took you to a completely different place. And you still think of him as a hero, but the play still worked on so many different other levels. The play was done in America and wasn't very successful. And Samuel L. Jackson played it in America. And people who said it was too reverent. They had difficulty seeing him like that. Now, I'm not saying ours was better, but I do think the approach to it was better. The writer told me she couldn't get the play done before coming to London. But once the play had been performed and won an Olivier Award, it's now performed the world over. So there was something that we did that worked.
So did you get your article done?
I did, and it's been attacked remorselessly since in America. And so much so that Spike Lee recently is writing a show, She's Gotta Have It. It's his show. He didn't write the episode, but they had this scene between a black Brit and an American Brit, which has caused quite a lot of controversy. I decided not to comment, by the way, but it's caused quite a lot of controversy.
This is terrible, isn't it?
It's sad. It's sad. And
sort of black people fighting each other. What's the point of that?
It's a little sad, but it's a little sad because it's hard to talk about because obviously I don't want to kind of inflame things further. But to say that we have Stockholm syndrome, that we've fallen in love with our white captors so much so that we don't see, we're sort of oblivious to racism only black Americans can be authentically black. I don't know. I don't quite know what their argument is, but the thrust of the scene was that black Brits are too white and not able to fully grasp the enormity of blackness. And I got some really nonsense tweets after the scene went out, saying, "Go Spike, go Spike. Where were black actors when our mothers were being lynched? Where were black actors during the civil rights?" I said, "I wasn't even born. What are you talking about?" It doesn't make any sense to me. I understand it, and I understand how their grievance, and that they would rather the part played by a black American, but how far do we take it? I mean, you can really understand the depth of feeling on this matter when it comes to racism in America. I mean, they have really struggled, really fought against a deeply oppressive and racist system. So they may feel that growing up in England, what would we know about that? What do we really know about that struggle? Well, we read books. I can understand it. I can empathize. I can act. I don't have to have lived it. I'm all for people wanting to go and sleep in a toilet to understand what it's like to play a tramp. I've got an imagination. I can put my mind there.
How did you make the leap? You transformed your life. You're doing something most people can only dream of. Where did that come from? How did it happen?
I've been extremely lucky. Several times I've been extremely lucky. And nobody's career is sort of a steep road to success. I mean, there's been many setbacks and many failures, but I just seem to have been blessed at certain points in my life. Once when I had psychosis and recovered, and then even prior to that, cancelling my RADA audition, and for some reason the letter never arriving, so that they phoned me up 2 days later and asked me, "Why didn't you turn up for your audition?" And I just lied. I said I was ill, but they never got that letter. And I remember cancelling. Well, because I didn't know one good drama school from another. And so when I got into a drama school, I cancelled what I now know is the top 5 drama schools. But for some bizarre reason, the RADA cancellation letter never arrived.
How was drama school on your horizon?
I was about to leave school and I had no idea what I wanted to do. And the teacher called me into school and said, "Look, we've been talking in the staff room and we think you should be an actor." I didn't come up with that. But I guess they saw that in me. So I'm lucky, and I'm very thankful that they suggested that. That was my eureka moment. An actor. Wow. Yeah, that sounds about right. Again, not thinking, but I'm a black kid from Birmingham, having no concept of the barriers, the hurdles that were in my way, that black actors didn't do that there weren't any black actors on television. There weren't any black actors on television at the time. Lenny Henry was just about to break through. So why I thought I could be an actor and succeed at it? Because I was always messing around. I was a clown. I was a classroom clown and good at it. I was always messing around and had an ability to, do funny accents and make people laugh. And I guess they thought that was the nub of talent that could take me somewhere.
So what do you think the lesson of your success is for other people?
That's hard. That's hard. I would say if I can make it, anybody can, but it's not easy. It's not an easy route. It's a tough route, and there are many setbacks, and there are a lot of hurdles. But if you want to make it, and you've got the talent, and the drive, and the right people behind you, and the support, which you're going to need, you can do anything. I tell that to my daughters. If they set their mind to it, they can do anything they want. They've got to set their mind to it. Who would have said, Michael Phelps could win 10 Olympic gold medals when he was 16 years old? Nobody. Who would have said, you would have, a young Asian boy from Lancashire would have gone on to be a national hero, reading the news. So I think, if anything, I tell these kids, you can be anything you put your mind to. The world really is your oyster. You've just got to really set your mind to it and you've got to be lucky. And you've got to be resilient. But really, anything can be done. Anything can be done.
And to come back to psychosis, I mean, what do you hope is being achieved by this? I mean, presumably for people to be less judgmental, for people to think more.
I've literally been astonished at the response I've had from this. I've had emails from people who have admitted to me that they suddenly realised what happened to their dads. They just thought he was crazy. Now they realise he had psychosis. I've had people write to me and say, that happened to me. I didn't know what it was. Now I know it's psychosis. Mind, the charity Mind, wrote to me the other day and said calls about psychosis rose 107% after my documentary. Psychiatrists have been ringing me saying, I hate you. I've been trying to explain psychosis for 30 years. You come along and in 1 hour, you change the entire topic of discussion. In 1 hour, that one documentary is suddenly people go, oh, that's what a nervous breakdown is. That's how you end up in a mental institution. That's what happens to you when you lose your mind. You're not some sort of lunatic. It's just stress, trauma, pressure, possibly drugs, possibly, drink. It's a combination of all these things, a rush of dopamine, and lack of sleep, and before you know it, you're talking gibberish, and you lose control. You're not the weirdo on the train. Now suddenly people know the weirdo on the train is probably just suffering a psychotic episode. Maybe you should say, are you okay? When I had my psychotic episode, I was extremely lucky. Again, so lucky on several points in my breakdown and several points in my life. One day, I was arrested, but I couldn't put this in the documentary because I couldn't prove it. I was arrested and locked up and went to magistrate's court in the morning because I was acting bizarrely. And I got out of the court in the morning. I had no idea who I was. No idea. And I remember standing on the sort of steps of the court, and a woman who had been in the court came out and she said to me, "Excuse me." So I was just in court. "Are you okay?" I said, I'm really confused. I don't know who I am. And she said, "Do you know where you live?" I said, "I can't remember." She said, "Do you know what your nearest tube station is?" And I looked, I thought, and I said, "I think it's Highbury and Islington." She reached her hand into a purse. And she gave me £10 to get home. She said, she flagged the cab down, said to the cab driver, "He's not well. Can you take this boy to Highbury and Islington?" And I got in the cab, went home, gave the guy the £10. How lucky was I? How lucky was I that she did that? Because that was the day I was sectioned. That very day was the day I got sectioned. So I was just lucky to be home when my friends came round. I was lucky to have that woman.
Because, anything could have happened if you hadn't been home, yeah.
That voice, I would have done anything that voice told me to do. And the doctor said to my mother, he's lucky that he's such a nice boy. He's lucky he's such a benevolent nature, because I would have done anything that voice told me to do. If that voice had been more aggressive, more powerful, more angry, if that voice had told me to jump in the Thames, I would have done. That voice would have told me to throw myself under a train, I would have done. I did everything it told me to do because it seemed to be telling me stuff. And it's an extraordinary sort of delusion, an extraordinarily powerful delusion when you're hearing voices. It's just, I was lucky that it was Martin Luther King, and I was lucky that he only told me to come try on a suit, but it was very scary.
And Do you remember what it was like being in a locked ward?
Yeah.
I mean, because for many people, that the thought of being in a mental ward
Yeah.
is utterly terrifying. Is it as terrifying as
It's extraordinary because and this is the actor in me kicking in. I found it fascinating. The actor in me was going, "This is really amazing." One of the things we do as actors is we people watch and we study behavior. So I knew I was not I knew I was in a mental institution. But there was part of my brain going, "Look at that guy. Look at that guy." And I remember this old
storing
man,
it away.
Storing it away. There was an old man who kept measuring the floor, measuring the distance between the door and the chair and the bed and the table. And if somebody moved, he'd measure the distance from where they were to where I found extraordinary behavior. So there was part of my brain, the actor in me was just going, "This is fat. This is great. This is great." And one night I heard somebody being dragged in speaking Shakespeare. And I thought, Shakespeare's Shakespeare. Oh, I know that. Oh, I know I'm not in. I know that. That is William. I can't be in too much trouble because that guy is quoting Shakespeare. So he's obviously reasonably intelligent. So I kind of think I'm okay. I just need to rest.
And how have other people or professional colleagues treated you since this has been out there? I mean, have you noticed any kind of like, I had no idea you were insane, David?
A lot. No, there's just a lot of people saying, just being amazed that.
So it's been entirely positive.
Entirely positive. And it's really given people hope, which is extraordinary. People are tweeting me saying, "Thank you so much." I've never had, as an actor, even at the height of Homeland, people kind of, if you're at home, you're in the supermarket, people kind of look and stare and kind of go, "Oh, that's that guy." But this is people literally cross the street and shake your hand and say thank you. Particularly older West Indian people, which really fills me with such joy. I was in Sainsbury's the other day and the older West Indian guy with dreadlocks, white hair, just said, "Come on, well done, man. Well done. Look after your mother. She's a wonderful woman. I lost my mother." And he just started talking about his mom and how he lost his mom and how I should really cherish her. And, he just said it was a wonderful thing that you did and wonderful thing that your mother did. And she's one. People come up and say to me, just thank you. Thank you for saying that. It's going to change so many lives. Tweets from people saying, I've been ashamed of it. But here's you, successful actor, said it. I don't feel ashamed of it anymore. I feel like I can talk about it. A friend of mine said her mother was watching it. They were watching it with her mother, and her mother turned to her and said, "I've never told you this before, but when I was 17, I had a psychotic breakdown." She said, and her mother said, "But you know what? Just like David, I got through it." And she never told her daughter that, never said it. And I just think that's extraordinary that people suddenly go, "I can say this now. I'm not going to be late." And look, there's still a lot of stigma out there.
Because people are afraid that other people will think you're still mad, in inverted commas, isn't it? Once you've lost it, well, there's something funny about them. That's what people are scared of admitting it, isn't it?
Well, and may this be proof that that's not true. I've made a full recovery, as many people do, and go on to lead full lives. And some people tweet me some really funny stuff, tell me about their experiences when they were in the Maudsley, or when they were sectioned, and the things that they did. And a lot of the people who have been sectioned, who have written to me, are award-winning journalists. They're judges. I had one guy from America ring me, tweet me and say, "Thank you, man. I just want to say thank you. I'm a judge in America, and it happened to me when I was young, but I've always been ashamed of it. But you've said that, and I no longer feel." I think that's just wonderful. I'm not saying it's changed anything, but I hope people no longer feel ashamed of it, and I hope it reduces the stigma a little bit.
I mean, it sort of answers the final question in a way, which is, if you could change the world, how would you change it?
I would educate people about the realities of not just drugs, mental illness, realities of psychosis. Get people to understand more. I don't think people are so fixed in their beliefs. So I would have national empathy classes and get people to understand and listen. And I think we need to. It used to be education, but I would say it's understanding.
David Harewood, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Thank you for sharing your ways to change the world. I hope you enjoyed that and found it as useful as I did. Please do give us a rating and a review if you did. You can watch all of these interviews on the Channel 4 News YouTube channel and also on the All 4 platform. Our producer is Sarah Goff. Until next time, bye-bye.